John Roberts was fast-tracked into the highest judicial position in our country to protect our Constitution and the people that it serves. But recent rulings of the Supreme Court have led me down a rabbit hole to try to figure this guy out. Today, we're going to take a look at his meteoric rise, and then we're going to do a chart analysis. After that, we're going to take a look at how his chart affects the Supreme Court's chart and our Constitution's chart. There is a power struggle dynamic here, but the Constitution is older and wiser. And finally, we're going to take a look at his upcoming transits. They are doozies. He will not be the same man in 3 years that we see now. The first shovel into this rabbit hole was to understand how John Roberts got to be Supreme Court Justice. What was this career path? It defies the law of gravity, is all I have to say. He was curated while he was in Harvard for this role. His first job, just out of Harvard, directly after graduation, was as a clerk for the U.S. Court of Appeals. He was learning the ins and outs of our judicial system. Next year, Rehnquist takes him under his wing to teach him the underpinnings of our highest court. A year later, he's shaping legal policy at the Justice Department, writing opinions to destroy the Voting Rights Act and Roe v. Wade. A year later, he's advising and defending President Reagan on presidential powers and constitutional prerogatives. He's writing executive orders, advising on ethical questions and the legislative process. Then he's placed in the largest law firm in D.C., representing multinational corporations. This firm specializes in domestic and international law, tax litigation, mergers and acquisitions, antitrust issues. It's here that he makes his first appearance before the Supreme Court, arguing against the government. The court unanimously upholds his decisions. In '89, Bush 1 pulls him back into the fray, and he's a prominent figure at the Supreme Court again, leading filings by the Bush administration. He's tested in front of the media. Bush 2 nominates him for the U.S. Court of Appeals, but it doesn't pass the Senate. So he's back at Hogan and Hartson as Clinton becomes president, and he's a partner now, recognized as a leading private Supreme Court litigator, winning 60% of the cases he brings before the court. In 2000, Bush 2 runs into problems with Florida to cinch the presidency, so Roberts is tagged to be his personal legal advisor. A year later, Bush 2 nominates him for the U.S. Court of Appeals, the D.C. Circuit, again, but Republicans lose the majority, so he stays at Hogan and Hartson. Next year, Republicans gain control of the Senate. Bush nominates him again, and he's in. Mind you, he's never represented the actual people of the United States, just the corporations. The next year, Bush nominates him to replace O'Connor, but Rehnquist dies in the process, so he pulls that first nomination and instead nominates Roberts for Chief Justice. In the Senate, he has to do some fast talking and fancy footsteps around his opinions that he published way back when around the Voting Rights Act and Roe. But he gets in. They saw something in him at Harvard, and 21 short years later, they shaped him to be one of the greatest weapons against our representative democracy. So what is it these powerful people, these powerful corporations saw in a young John Roberts? I didn't have a birth time for him, so I needed to rectify his chart to be able to get the depth of information that a chart can offer. What's interesting is he has two very tight aspects in his chart that align with the very personal things that happen in his life, the death of his father, his mother, his sister, and his seizures. But he also has another tight aspect that aligns with a lot of his the moves that we see that he does out in public. Looking at this chart through an evolutionary view, understanding why the soul is here, what it's here to accomplish, what shadows it brings with it. The character that came to mind was Thomas Cromwell. He was the fixer for Henry VIII. But in the end, Henry VIII had him beheaded after all of the work that Thomas Cromwell did. So that's what kept popping up in this chart. I'm not saying he was Thomas Cromwell, but let me share with you what I found. To understand the pieces of the universal soul that John Roberts brought with him, we start by taking a look at the nodes, the universal planets, and we're going to look at Saturn as well. The South Node in the 9th house in Cancer suggests that this soul story that John Roberts has taken with him into this lifetime had some traumatic experiences around the law, around expanding their horizons, their philosophies, around the rules. And this is where Thomas Cromwell comes into play, because the idea of Cancer is you are holding on to tradition. You are holding on to that which makes you feel safe. To understand the pivotal chapter that happened in the demise in the South Node, the thing that the soul died with, saying, oh my gosh, this was unresolved in my life, we look to the ruler of Cancer, which is the moon over here in the 6th house. It's in Pisces. In Pisces, it would suggest that this soul was overwhelmed by the circumstances, or they were deceived, or they gave themselves away. In the 6th house, those circumstances would have been due to things like their work, how they earned money, not living up to who they were truly as a soul, giving themselves away. The North Node is the suggestion of how to assimilate his entire chart. It's in Capricorn. Capricorn's coach is Saturn. A Capricorn North Node suggests that this time Roberts will be met with similar circumstances, but is asked to be open and curious. It's in the 3rd house. Open and curious and turning on all the senses to gather important details about what is going on around him. What is the public sentiment? What is being said? Maybe understanding that could have helped last time. Now Saturn, as the coach over here in the 2nd house, suggests austere living conditions in the past time. Maybe a fire and brimstone kind of approach, thinking of the preacher example that we've given. Fixed values that were part of his demise. Maybe they trusted the wrong people. Maybe those people took him body, mind, and soul. So this time, life's journey is to teach you where you are sacrificing your needs and resources for the sake of others. It's a masterclass to learn about the emotional, psychological, and spiritual needs and the sacrifices you make for the sake of security. So you can see in his South Node theme this fear of powerful people, not knowing how they work. How can he figure them out so he doesn't have this traumatic end, whatever that was, in whatever role he had? But he's doing the same thing over again. What he is choosing in the center of that wheel, we make our choices, free will, he's choosing to go through that same theme again, but this time he has become that powerful person, but he is still enslaving himself to others' ideas, to others' needs, giving himself away. And now he's dealing with the law, the rules of our, society here, whatever, in a different way. So it may feel different, this soul story. But ultimately, again, he's still going through that moon lesson of giving himself away, delusions of power. He could use that same power to break away from that Cancerian South Node stuff, that love of tradition, having things the same way, feeling safe in the same. He could change that, but he's not. And this is where one of his most powerful aspects, Jupiter and Uranus combined, could help him break free, or they could also just help him dig in his heels. Pluto up here in the 11th house represents the unconscious trauma he brings to this life that he has to resolve. Pluto creates barriers around that trauma, so we don't want to experience it again, so we develop a whole lot of control mechanisms. What are his mechanisms around? Feeling powerless in Leo. In the 11th house, he hung with the wrong crowd to achieve his dreams. Maybe he sold his truth to belong to something, to get what he wanted. The ask is this time is, don't do life for the applause. Be true to yourself. Belong to yourself first, then seek out others. Neptune in the 1st house down here also plays a role in this story. Somewhere in that past time, he was overpowered at the bargaining table, deceived by the law or justice. His power was taken away. This time, the ask is to reimagine what self-empowerment means. Its ruler, Venus is in the third house. It's in a sign that talks about philosophy, beliefs, laws. That's the kind of work he's doing. But the shadow of Neptune in Libra would be a delusion that he is the law, that there is no law. Those kind of things. Neptune, delusional. So there's a theme here that would suggest that this soul, incarnating this time, would have these opportunities to work with law again, to re-examine what is fair, what is just, what is truthful. It was unjust what was done to him. He didn't have any power over the law. So instead, this time, he comes to this earth. He gets that power, but he's still stuck in feeling that he really doesn't have the power to affect the scales of what is done in society, of how others are treated. That south node of being attached to tradition and how things have always been done. We have always had slaves in one shape or way or form. That idea, stuck to these traditional values, the fire and brimstone kind of stuff that may have been a part of his past history as well, especially with Saturn in the second house. Fixed values. The next planet is Uranus. It represents the cognitive blocks that you bring this time. This suggests that there was trauma last time, public or social alienation or humiliation. It's tied with Jupiter, so the soul's beliefs, religion, or knowledge, the philosophies, were part of this downfall. The ask is to reform his beliefs about social prejudice or hierarchy, the haves or the have-nots. Now let's take a look at the planets that we see play out in his daily life. We're going to start with the Sun. The Sun in Aquarius in the fourth suggests a path to find belonging and emotional security with those who are on the cutting edge, who are considered brilliant, who are revered for their visionary qualities, unwavering in their truth. But Saturn is the coach there, ruling from the second house. The caution is about buying your way in, sacrificing your values, greed, being inflexible to other opinions, to other ideas, being so stoic in your emotion that you refuse to feel. The ask here with Saturn in Scorpio is to understand the psychological and the spiritual and the emotional nature of yourself. His moon is in the sixth house. The suggestion there is to be the observer this time around. See the big picture. Keep your senses alert to the unseen patterns. You can either be delusional or visionary. It's in the new moon phase, so there's an excitement here. He wants to do it my way. Let me try. It's, a human being on training wheels. He would be fond of all forms of escapism, including being a workaholic. The moon in the sixth house would indicate a big worrier, and a likely topic of his worry would be his health. But Pisces can be prone to manipulate, think of Harvey Weinstein, or being manipulated. They can make excuses. They can get lost in the illusions of life and love. Planets in the sixth house are also focused on continuous improvement. The idea of, I want to bring something forward, to be of service in some way. I have something valuable that I continue to refine, that adds to the work and what I bring to society. So you can kind of see the light and shade of this in John Roberts' chart. And this is where that moon in Pisces can get lost to delusion, this higher aspiration of doing all these great things and making excuses for some of the feedback that he's getting with that Venus in the third house in Sagittarius about his perspective on the law. He has this idea, sold his soul to another set of owners in hopes of being safe from the effects of the law. Only time will tell. Have you noticed I'm wearing black and white today? Mercury here is asking him to think for himself, to go against the grain. It's the power of innovative thinking, creative writing, and ideas. But be careful to know that they are your thoughts. You're looking for honesty versus approval. We're talking Mercury here. Our perceptions, how we pick up what's going on around us, that filter. Corporation or the cult, in Aquarius. Corporation, I have my own ideas and I'm so solid in them that I can be in an environment where there are other ideas and not feel threatened. Or Aquarius, I allow others to control my thoughts. In his chart, Mercury is opposite Pluto. Pluto wants to control. Opposite Mercury, it wants to control thoughts. So that's going to lean a little bit closer to the idea of cult. He doesn't want anyone else's ideas to overpower his own. He lives in fear of losing arguments, of being proven wrong, of having to change his ideas. Mercury opposite Pluto in his chart, I call this his bullhorn in a coffee shop aspect. He is going to be heard. His moon in Pisces would not indicate that he's going to be really strong in forcing that opinion. He's going to work behind in the background, under the waves to get the work done, to manipulate the situation. So he can do that Mercury and Pluto work. The other invitation would be to understand your thoughts and to understand your issues with power, Pluto, and leadership, fear of losing power of that leadership, fear of not being heard, which fits into his past life story. But he's choosing this way. Free will at the center of that wheel. We're all doing the best we can. But he's a Supreme Court justice. Next is Venus in Sagittarius. He's a great conversationalist, good debater about rules, law, philosophy, being in Sagittarius, loves to write, to formulate fiery ideas or schemes, loves cultured people or topics. This is not your idle chit-chatter. He also has an appreciation for pushing boundaries with Venus in Sagittarius. But problem is, he can be so busy espousing his rightness that he fails to hear key information from other people. There are aspects to Pluto and Mercury that suggest he bends the law to the shadow, Pluto. It's very highbrow, better than you kind of a thinker. Mars in the 7th in Aries suggests that past experiences in feeling powerless get rewired to experience self-empowerment in debate or making deals. He likes to argue. He loves to win. He acts quickly and decisively. He's quick on his feet in negotiations. Now, his Saturn will caution this to some extent over here in the 2nd house, because he'll fear he'll appear out of control, expose his cards, and Scorpio likes to keep things close to the chest. And the problem is with this Mars, it isn't really held in check, and this exacerbates that idea of a highbrow communicator thinking he's better than others. It gives him an arrogance that he has the higher mind, and that others just can't brave the harsh truth. Jupiter in Cancer wants to explore the limitations and the avenues of social standing by being revolutionary. But Jupiter is there to reveal the faults via selfishness and refusing to change for fear of losing support in life. Jupiter and Uranus in Cancer. Only he can save the world. Only he knows that the answer is holding on to our traditional values, that which keeps those who need to have the power safe. Cancer wants to preserve the past. So he has Jupiter there. Jupiter has a choice. It can preserve things that help the people, or it can preserve the things that help those who he feels hold the power. Uranus is right next to it. Uranus wants to say, awaken, Jupiter, awaken to another way of keeping society safe. But he's not picking up what Uranus is putting down. Instead, he's digging his feet in. That superpower instead wants to be seen as a savior to bring everyone else along to his idea, his cult, Mercury in Aquarius, Pluto in Leo, that power struggle. Now, Saturn in Scorpio, over here in the 2nd, he is a man of careful words. He's unemotional, extremely self-reliant. But again, that fire and brimstone thing just keeps coming up in my mind. His life's work is going to be overcoming that rigid nature and reconciling the deep insecurities about survival that he has. about losing what he values, what he possesses. And it's not just the physical stuff. Fear leads him to greed and hoarding psychological power over others and watching them squirm. I happen to be married to a person with multiple Scorpio planets. Watching other people squirm is how Scorpio learns. Saturn is a fixed planet, right? It's your fears, it's your anxieties, it's your life's work. It's in a fixed sign, fixed water, it holds. It's in a fixed house, Earth. It doesn't move. This man is not prone to change, but life is bringing him some experiences in the next few years that are going to change him and that will change how we see him. An interesting chart. The Republicans saw his Pluto-Mercury opposition, his ability to control the dialogue without having to yell. They felt his revolutionary vision with Jupiter and Uranus conjuncting Cancer, that reverence of the past, and that Superman feeling of I can do anything, and I will do anything to get this vision. He revered history like they do, the old way of doing things, where just the chosen few have control of the many, where they can assert a class system that suits their ideological needs. He's a federalist, pushing the power back to the states, even if the states decide that they're going to violate the Constitution, testing that Constitution and the Supreme Court's ability to uphold it. But you see, there's a bigger story at play here. Here's the chart of our Constitution. Notice the Sun and Jupiter are in a square. In general, this is a continuous improvement approach, balancing brilliant ideas with pragmatic implementation. And then we have the Sun, Venus, and Mercury sitting all together in this seventh house of learning diplomatic power. We're thinking through the nuts and bolts of ideas, including the alignment to our values and working out our problems. Let's add the Supreme Court to this. So the Supreme Court's chart is on the outside. First thing you notice is look at the Supreme Court's Sun, Mercury, and Saturn together in Pisces. This gives our Constitution the pressure to uphold the Constitution's aspirations. It takes the Constitution out of its analyzing all these bits and pieces to see if everything's right, and it gives us the pressure to get the big picture and to find the hidden things. So together, the Supreme Court's Jupiter in Cancer squares the United States of America's Constitution's Neptune. It puts pressure on our Constitution to reach higher, for Jupiter in our Supreme Court's chart to reach higher. They're both visionary, upholding justice. Justice, because Jupiter can also be associated with the idea of justice and fairness, expansion of that. Cancer, for the people. Now, let's bring John Roberts into the mix. Look right here. His Pluto Mercury opposition sits right on top of the Constitution's life lessons. Saturn in the first house, about self-empowerment. Corporation or the cult? Are we blindly following others' ideas, or do we hold on to our own ideas even in a room of conflicting ideas because we feel so strongly about what we believe? Here we have the Supreme Court's chart. John Roberts' Mercury and Pluto aspect, it's testing the Supreme Court's appreciation for, that's Venus appreciation, for corporation or the cult. What is our aspiration for? We know with our Constitution it is for freedom, and our actions for that. He's simply testing it, sent to us to make our Supreme Court stronger, to realize, like in our Constitution, where we are weak so we can strengthen it. There's a bigger picture at play with the Constitution and with the Supreme Court. You see, transiting Pluto is approaching the natal Pluto of our Constitution, revealing our shadows. It's approaching Saturn. This is the bigger picture of what we are experiencing, John Roberts is just helping us to see that. And here in the Supreme Court's chart, we have the same thing happening. The Supreme Court was established just 2 years after our Constitution. These Plutonian transits don't mean that we're just going to be sitting there idly by watching things happen. It moves us. And what happens first is, right now in America's birth chart, the Declaration of Independence, 1776, the idea that we are declaring our independence. Well, Pluto is hitting our south node right now. It's emptying out a lot of that stuff about feeling like we don't have power, that we can't express ourselves. Aquarius. It's heading toward America's, the Declaration of Independence, our moon in that chart. There's more to come. It's going to be very active up until about 2040 and after. But right now, we're going to start with emptying out the South Node in America's chart, and then we're going to get into the Constitution, and then we're going to get into the Supreme Court. So this leads us to ask, well, how does John Roberts play into this? He has 4 aspects coming up within the next 2 years that are going to reshape him. They are preparing for a profound transformation of John Roberts in 2028. The first aspect happens around October of this year, and that's when the South Node, along with Jupiter and Mars, conjunct his natal Pluto-Mercury opposition. Now, he's had this aspect before, back in 2008, where he was celebrated, where CNN said that he turned a brief dissent in a criminal appeal into something straight out of a Dashiell Hammett detective novel. But this time, it's the South Node that's getting a lot of activity. Back in 2008, he had Neptune, along with that North Node, on that Mercury. This time, Jupiter is making the release something bigger, and it's something about the power of his writing being diminished. The next aspect he has coming up is Jupiter on that same Pluto-Mercury dynamic. I mean, that these things are hitting one after the other. It's just amazing. Talk about divine timing. That aspect happens in 2026 in November, and again throughout 2027. So he's had this aspect of Jupiter conjoining his Mercury 3 times before. The first time, he was graduating Harvard. The second time is when Bush II got him into the U.S. Court of Appeals. And the third is at the time when Donald Trump announced he was running for the 2016 election. You see the voice growing. By July of next year, we'll see some shifts in how his voice is being used, because this time, when transiting Jupiter is on that, bullhorn in a coffee shop dynamic, this time Saturn and Neptune are in his 7th house of diplomatic power, of creating partnerships and agreements. So there's a suggestion there with Neptune there, and Neptune losing power, delusion, maybe dreaming a whole lot, maybe getting a magic shot, but maybe not making it because there's Saturn right there with it. Hard lessons in life. You got to work really hard, and they are both close to his natal Mars. So losing power. Top this off with 1 month later, after Jupiter leaves that Mercury, he now has a solar eclipse directly on his sun. A solar eclipse is like the curtains closing on an important piece of your life because it's regarding the sun. And over the next 6 months, those curtains open to reveal a different part of the story. So something ends and then something begins. John Roberts last had a solar eclipse on his sun in 2008. His father actually died about 3 months later after that solar eclipse. But Pluto wasn't down here on his sun at the same time. This one looks dramatically different. This time, he has Venus traveling with the sun and the moon and the South Node. an ending of something regarding a relationship, a connection, a partnership that'll be revealed over 6 months. But it's this Pluto and the North Node increasing, the North Node increases whatever it is in the basement that he's been blocking from coming out. This should be an interesting twist in his story. And what plays a part in how that eclipse may speak is transiting Saturn, squaring that Uranus-Jupiter conjunction in his 10th house of his public image. So you have Saturn in the 7th house, partnerships, relationships, diplomatic power, squaring, putting pressure on the public image. His savior kind of complex up there of only he knows the right answer, only he can get the job done. This aspect has happened before. When he was 13, he felt this clarity around the direction that he wanted to go in. And he decided he was going to go to boarding school. He had this same aspect again when he went back to Hogan and Hartson for the second time when he became a partner. So I think we're going to see a change in his public position. I think he may decide that he doesn't want to be a Supreme Court justice. But with Pluto approaching the sun, it's shadier than that. And with Neptune and Saturn in that 7th house, there's more happening there that is preparing him to receive Pluto on the sun. I'll share a private story here. My mom currently has Pluto on the sun. It's an immutable house. His is in a cardinal house. Things happen. You like to start, create. Fires happen. You know, in a mutable house, it's a little bit different. But it's really hard on her to receive the amount of stuff that Pluto wants to bring up. And she keeps denying a lot of the stuff. It's just a lot to handle. This will change who he is and how we see him. Key people in the government and in the corporations that play a large part in how our world runs saw something in John Roberts. What they saw was that Jupiter-Uranus conjunction. Here's a man that will do anything we tell him, and he has the power to speak and the power to manipulate the written word and the spoken word to help us take apart the Constitution and even the Supreme Court that has been created to uphold and defend that Constitution in the name of the people. But John Roberts is going to be undergoing a huge transformation that I don't think these folks counted on. But in addition, what matters more is the invitation to the people, as seen symbolically by the movement of the planet Pluto, hitting the chart of the United States of America, our Declaration of Independence, hitting our Constitution, hitting our Supreme Court. The people will be inspired to rebuild this Constitution, to fight back in a way I just don't think these folks are ready for. I don't think they could plan for it. They're trying to take away all those bits and pieces. But we know that we, the people, are stronger than just the chosen few. They have other issues operating deep in their soul that weaken them to the power that we hold. I love doing this kind of research using astrology. If you're interested in doing a rabbit hole on someone else, let me know. I hope you've enjoyed this. Please leave a like, a comment, whatever, and I'll see you next time.